Lawrence Neal here. Welcome back to High Intensity Business, the podcast where we discuss high intensity strength training and provide you with the tools, the tactics, and the strategies to help you grow your strength training business. To download and read the transcript for this episode, please go to highintensitybusiness.com, search for episode 368 to find the transcript download button on the post. Today's topic is Tim Ryan and I are going to be addressing the factors of quote unquote functional training or functional ability. And this is part 8 of the high intensity training fundamentals series. Today's guest is obviously Tim Ryan. Tim is a master superstar instructor and owner of Strong Life Personal Training in Barrington, Illinois. You can contact Tim to learn about his services to studio owners and personal trainers, where it helps you with your personal training operation through workshops, mentoring, and seminars. And you can find out more about that on his website by going to stronglifetraining.com or just emailing Tim direct at info@stronglifetraining.com. Tim, welcome back. Great to see you again.
Thank you, Lawrence. Good to see you today.
Cool. So let's get into this. So where do you want to start when it comes to functional ability?
Well, this whole concept is sort of a real pet peeve of mine because the fitness industry at large, the mainstream fitness industry is all caught up in this idea of functional training and doing your exercises in a way that sort of mimic what you might be doing in everyday life, or if you're an athlete of some sort, doing your exercise in a way that's going to, mimic what you're doing in your sport. And the idea is that by performing your exercises in a certain way like that, it's going to better prepare you or better transfer those abilities over to your sport or over to your everyday life. And, this can really get into a lot of nonsense you see that's going on out there. And you've got things where, on the one hand, you hear people say that, well, machines, exercise machines, weight machines, Nautilus, et cetera, those type of machines are not functional, that we don't live our life sitting in an exercise machine. So, when we do our exercise on a machine like that, we're not going to be able to, what we develop on that machine is not really going to transfer well to everyday life. You're not going to, build balance and stability, or you're not going to train the supporting muscles or the stabilizing muscles because the machine does everything for you. You hear this kind of stuff, and you get people that are doing things in the gym where you're trying to do exercises on a BOSU ball, the big ball in the stabilizing platform, and you stand on this platform and this wobbly board, and you're trying to do exercises on that. I've even seen videos and pictures of people standing on the big giant Swiss ball and trying to do squats on top of the Swiss ball. And
with
the idea is that right. I mean, there's pictures and videos on the internet of somebody standing on a giant, overgrown beach ball type of thing, and perched atop this with a barbell on their back and trying to squat and balance themselves. And, you can find all kinds of crazy things of what people are doing and trying to make the environment that they're on very unstable and wobbly so that they have to balance themselves while they're doing the exercise and that sort of thing. And you get all this craziness. And there was even a trend of different equipment manufacturers building machines that, either cable and pulley machines that allowed you to just move in all kinds of crazy directions and didn't define your path of movement in any way. And the idea was that by doing exercises with this type of device, that is going to allow you to, use your stabilizer muscles and build that stability and the balance and not be forced into some pathway that's unnatural for your body. And even Cybex built some machines. I don't think they any longer produce them, but I think it was their VR3 line, where the movement arms on the machines, it wasn't a, like a cable machine, but it was a traditional machine, but the movement arms on the machines could just move in all kinds of different directions. So when you would push out on the chest press, it would, go in all these different directions, almost like you're using a dumbbell or something like that.
The problem with that is you can't then tailor the strength curve appropriately for one downside. And not to mention,
you've got
probably moving biomechanically incongruent as well, potentially causing injury risk, and obviously just basically you doing redundant movement. Yeah.
Well, I remember reading all sorts of reports of people getting hurt on these machines and doing things like, tearing a pec muscle or something on the chest press, because, you'd be pushing this thing out and the movement arm would be kind of wild and unwieldy and hard to control. And, just all sorts of strains or muscle tears or different crazy things. And who knows, that may be why they stopped manufacturing the machines, as they got into some liability issues. But anyway, this fascination and this fixation that the fitness industry has on this idea of functional training has really led to all sorts of craziness. And I think we really have to step back and analyze this in such a way to be able to see if any of this stuff makes any sense at all. And I think as we proceed through this, you're going to see, the listener will see, and if they don't already understand this, you will see that this whole idea of functional training is complete nonsense. All right. None of what these people claim to be doing, or the benefits that they tout of this type of training, none of these things are actually attainable in the way that they're going after them. Okay. So we're going to kind of take this and dissect this from the base and see what sort of factors control the acquisition of functional ability. Okay, so you had mentioned these 6 factors of functional ability, or the factors of functional ability. There's actually six general factors of functional ability. And I should say at the outset that the sort of the scientific discipline that studies and researches and applies this type of concept is the field of motor learning. All right. And it's not been, years ago, it was a much more popular field for people to get into, but you don't hear a lot about it today. But motor learning refers to, the name comes from the concept that the type of nerves that control our muscles are called motor nerves. All right. So motor learning is really the science and application of the acquisition of skills, the acquisition of the ability to control our bodies, move our bodies, control our muscles, perform various movements and skills. And really this discipline of motor learning studies how do we acquire skills and abilities, and how best is that developed, and how do we become better at those things, and what sort of things can we do to better acquire those skills. And this applies to obviously different sports and athletic events and sports and athletic skills and abilities, but the same thing applies to anything in life. Okay, anything that we do with our bodies, anything that we do with our muscles falls under this discipline of motor learning. Okay, and when we study the facts of motor learning, this is where we're going to realize that this fitness industry's fascination with functional training is entirely unsupportive. Okay, so let's kind of address some of these things. And we've been referring to these factors of functional ability. And what we have here is there's 6 general factors that will dictate and control or have influence over how well we're able to perform any specific task. Okay. And then obviously there'll be some other things that come into play with some of this as we apply it to exercise or sports and athletic events. But basically what we have here are three factors that can be developed through exercise or improved upon through exercise. We have a couple of genetic factors, and we have a primary factor that's only developed through skill practice, specific practices of and rehearsal and refinement of that. So let's address the exercise related factors first. Okay. Mm-hmm. The first thing we have is muscular strength. All right. Muscular strength is going to be a primary factor in the overall development and the fitness, the strength, whatever, of our muscles. And this is going to apply in a lot of different areas, not only the development of force, but also endurance, the ability to sustain the work and things like that. But in a nutshell, the stronger and better conditioned your muscles are, the better you're going to be able to perform and apply, force and sustain the work associated with any type of activity. So this would apply if you're doing manual labor. This would apply if you're out in your yard and you're doing yard work and mowing your lawn and doing lawn and gardening work and things like that. It would apply to carrying things mm-hmm. and lifting objects and things like that. But it would also obviously apply to things that we do on a daily basis, climbing a flight of stairs. All right. Your muscles are producing the force and contracting and lifting your body up each step that you take, stepping off a curb, doing all these different types of things. And of course, getting into different sports and athletic events. When your muscles are stronger and better conditioned, they're going to be better able to perform their job. So anything that your muscles do, you're going to be better at. Okay. Now, this doesn't mean that there aren't other factors that can, if you want to get specifically good at something, there's other things that are going to come into play. But just in this general nature, it starts sort of, I kind of refer to this as sort of your raw materials that, as the condition of the muscles is going to dictate, at the base of it, the raw materials or the ability that you have to do anything that the muscles are responsible for. Okay. And I oftentimes talk about the muscles sort of being the engine of the body because, all the power, all the force, all the productive, abilities originate with the muscles. So just like in a car, you have an engine, and the engine is the only thing that's, producing the power and performing the work to propel your car forward. All right. There's other things that are necessary to transfer that work that the engine is performing and transfer it to a usable output. But at the heart of it, it's
it's like
the engine.
Yeah. It's like the wheels, the chassis, the seats is kind of window dressing relative to the engine's importance in that analogy, right?
Yeah, exactly. You need the drivetrain, you need the wheels, you need obviously fuel being pumped to the engine and things like that. You need other things to transfer that work from the engine to move the car forward. But at the heart of it, that engine is what is producing all the power, So obviously,
window dressing is the wrong word, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, right. I got your point, but
can't go very far about wheels. Yeah.
So as if you produce a better engine, if that engine has more horsepower, if that engine develops and produces more torque, to turn the wheels, you're going to have a better performing car. Okay, so in the same way, your muscles are sort of like the engine of the body. And as those muscles become stronger, have more endurance, to have an overall improved ability to perform their work, that is going to be transferable to anything that we do. Okay, so obviously that's a number one key factor that can be developed through exercise. The next thing you have
can I just summarize and ask a question on number one? I really appreciate that. It's really valuable for me to revisit this. So just to, I guess, maybe just touch on the physiology for a minute. So what the way I understand it is, obviously when you're strengthening that muscle, you are producing stronger and more quantity of muscle fibers across that spectrum, and obviously genetics will determine how that, what occurs there, but then you're also developing more connective tissue strength, better joint strength, better bone density, and then better capacity overall through more blood transportation, so more veins and capillaries and things like that. And all of these systems and factors are going to kind of work together to allow one to be able to produce more force, which is then going to transfer to all of these other daily activities that you've talked about.
Right. So you're going to have a situation where the way I like to explain it is that as that muscle is enhanced, everything associated with that muscle is going to improve with it. It's like the body is logical and basically understands that, as that muscle becomes stronger, first off, it needs, as it enhances and its abilities improve, it needs that supporting structure. So the connective tissues increase in strength, your tendons, the joint connective tissues and ligaments and things like that. The bones get stronger. But then those other things that serve the muscles, obviously the nervous system is enhanced. The control of the nerves to activate those muscles and to control those muscles are improved. And the circulatory system, the blood vessels and the mitochondria, in the muscle cells and the energy producing things. It's like that entire system becomes enhanced. And that's why I try to get across to people that, when you're strength training, it's not about just simply strengthening your muscles. Okay. Yes, you are enhancing that muscle tissue, you are developing those muscle fibers, you're hypertrophying the muscle fibers and so forth. But you're improving everything about that muscle and the supporting structure and those things that serve the muscles. Your entire skeletal system and connective tissues and nervous system is all being enhanced and upgraded to better serve those muscles and apply those new enhanced abilities. Okay. Yeah. So you've got all that kind of stuff going on, and all that stuff is sort of transferable to anything you do with those muscles. Is that, because that muscle produces all of our movement and provides all the stability and so forth of our body and our ability to perform work, that as that entire system and network is improved, all of that is transferable and applicable to anything we do involving movement and work and exercise and athletics and stuff. You're just building all of those raw materials. And again, it's like you're taking and enhancing that engine and making it have more horsepower and produce more torque and just have more ability to, perform work. And all of that is being improved.
So, yeah, I mean, really well said. And this is, I guess, why some people in our space would call what we do is great general conditioning, overall conditioning, right?
Yeah.
And we've talked about this on a previous podcast, but obviously the way we understand the muscles to really communicate to the rest of the body is through myokines and through all these chemical messages that, like you say, upregulate every other tissue and organ in the body, which is so exciting and so profound when you realize that, the strength training is having this global effect. And that's then further supported by the fact that movement is our most preserved function, right? So everything in the body is kind of programmed to serve that function. So yeah, that's great. I think that was good to get into the physiology, because I think it's useful to be able to talk about that with clients, obviously to a level depending on their interest and what's useful for them. But no, that was great. So should we move on to number 2?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Right. So the next thing would be this concept of what we call cardiovascular efficiency. Okay. And, here, number one, I don't want to get too far off in the weeds talking about, cardiovascular training or whatnot, because that's a topic that we're going to get into in a future session here. But what I'm referring to in this sense is a cardiovascular efficiency is just that the efficiency of the cardiovascular system is enhanced. And this kind of ties into what we just started talking to about the muscles, and that all of the things that support the muscles are enhanced. Okay, so sticking with our analogy with an engine and a car and things like that, the cardiovascular system is sort of the fuel delivery system to the muscles. All right, so for the muscles to perform their work, obviously the muscles require oxygen and energy delivery and removal of waste products and this type of thing. So the cardiovascular efficiency just simply refers to the body's ability to do that, to sort of deliver those things to the muscles and carry away the waste products and just process that whole fuel system so that the muscles can perform their work, so that that whole system that's serving those muscles being enhanced. So cardiovascular efficiency, and again, just a brief touch upon this, is that much of the benefit and enhancement that we're talking about here doesn't necessarily apply to the heart itself, but to sort of the vascular system and sort of the delivery of that to the muscles, or more specifically, the muscles' ability to extract energy and oxygen and whatnot from the blood to do their work. So, there's a lot of information that the heart itself is not necessarily improving and enhancing, but the muscles' ability to extract and utilize oxygen improves. Okay, so a lot of the benefits actually occur within the muscles. Increased mitochondria, for example, increased capillarization of the blood vessels and so forth, and just the ability of the muscles to take the oxygen that's being delivered to it and extract it and utilize it. So you've got this whole sort of process of how the muscles are being supplied with energy and oxygen, how those waste products are being, removed and processed and so forth. So that system becomes more efficient, and sort of the fuel delivery system and management of all this stuff becomes enhanced through exercise. Okay, so this allows the muscles to do their work more efficiently and to sustain the work longer, have greater endurance and stamina and so forth. And again, these two things are just working hand in hand and being enhanced through this process. Okay, so when we're exercising, again, not just improving the muscles themselves, but all the things connected to and serving the muscles are becoming enhanced, and the whole process of and those abilities are being improved with everything that's supporting those muscles.
Got it.
So
okay. Perfect. Yeah.
And then the last thing related to exercise that we can improve on would be what we would call flexibility. All right. So the ability of the muscles and the joints to sort of go through a certain range of motion. Okay. So in this is not something, when we think of flexibility and the ability to go through a range of motion, this is not something that is a sort of a positive thing that is producing anything. This is something that's merely allowing something to occur. All right. So what flexibility does is it doesn't perform any functional thing. It doesn't produce any power. It doesn't produce any energy. It's not doing anything productive. It's merely allowing something to be done. So it allows the muscles to have sort of an enhanced ability to go through a range of motion. So with this, what happens is through the process of exercise and doing sort of a range of motion within an exercise, you're taking and enhancing the muscle and the structure and everything throughout that range of motion. And, most of the exercises we do, you're going to have a fair amount of stretching. So on one end of the range of motion, the muscles are being stretched or elongated. And then you go through the contraction phase and you shorten the muscle and, you contract the muscle. And, probably in any given exercise, you're not necessarily stretching to your full limit or even contracting to your full limit because so many muscles cross more than one joint. So, you would have to, perform an exercise that would be not possible all in one movement. Something like for your bicep exercise, to be stretched, your arm has to be down, okay, sort of more, down at your side. But to be contracted, it has to be lifted up over your head, to get a full contraction because it crosses not only the elbow joint and the shoulder joint. So think of, sort of the standard, whether you're doing a standing barbell curl or something like that, or you're doing a bicep curl type of machine where your arms are down and at your side, you're kind of, when the arm is down, it's more in a stretched position and you can completely flex the elbow. So you're contracting the muscle, but it's not fully contracted because the part that interacts with the shoulder, to contract that part, you have to, bring your arm up and lift it up over your head to get more of a contraction. So think of the old Nautilus compound position bicep. Yeah. So, the compound position bicep machine, that is going to sort of enhance that contracted position of the bicep, but then you're not going through the full stretch position. So, theoretically, to go through the entire range of motion of the bicep, you'd have to do a movement that started with your arm at your side, at the bottom, hanging at your side, contract through the range of motion, and then simultaneously lift your arm over your head and continue to, to contract. So it's kind of like, any one exercise, a standing barbell curl does a very thorough range of motion and takes from the stretch to a pretty thorough contraction, but then doing it lifted over your head, sort of in the compound position bicep machine, it contracts it even further at the shoulder joint, So again, not to get off in the weeds in that, but just to say that, in any one exercise, you're not necessarily taking a muscle through a complete stretch, through a complete contraction. But what we do obviously want to do when we talk about full range of motion is that of a given exercise, you're kind of performing the full range of motion of that exercise that's safe. And obviously Bill DeSimone would have some things to say about this with his moment arm exercise and his, I forget what the name of his new book is. Maybe you know that.
Yeah, I've got it right in front of me. It's Joint Friendly Fitness. Great read.
Right.
Yep.
So, sometimes, and again, this isn't the topic of today's discussion, but sometimes we're in a situation where, joint friendly fitness. So there may be a situation where stretching a muscle is counterproductive in terms of your joint health, okay? Or probably a better way to say this is going through a certain range of motion is counterproductive to your joint health. So this isn't about just getting extreme stretching and all of this type of thing, but being able to work within the range of motion that is safe for your joints. Okay. So at any rate, sometimes flexibility can be tried to practice to extreme, because trying to get into contortions and movements and extreme ranges of motion that may increase the stretch on a muscle may be placing your joint and your connective tissues at a disadvantaged position and placing stress in certain areas that is not good for the health of those structures and so forth. So simply, when we're talking about flexibility, it's just sort of the ability to go through the range of motion of a movement and have our muscles be allowed to do that. So when we talk about this functional ability, the flexibility is sort of merely allowing your muscles to go through that range of motion. Okay. And I would say that general strength training, particularly on good quality equipment, machines and whatnot, allow you to go through a very adequate, thorough range of motion that enhances, that ability within the muscles and enhances that flexibility to move through that range of motion, and certainly maintains that flexibility, as we age, and fights back that sort of that old age stiffness that often comes on from lack of use and from atrophy and so forth. But we have a situation where in certain cases, sort of extreme ranges of flexibility or range of motion are necessary for certain, say, athletic events or something.
Like martial arts, or even gymnastics and things like that.
Yes.
There's a huge trade-off.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Martial arts, gymnastics. Even I've got a niece who's a ballerina. And, she's got to be able to do all sorts of movements and lift her leg up over her head and, do these different things. And, to develop that kind of flexibility, it may be necessary. So whether we're talking about gymnastics or martial arts or ballet or something, having that extreme range of flexibility may be necessary to do the movements and do the things that are required by those sports or that activity. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's healthy for us. Okay. Because you may have to be compromising your joint structure in order to achieve that kind of flexibility, and it's not healthy for the joints. So you may have issues where later in life you're have caused trauma to your joints that are going to show up later in life, or even in the short term, you're increasing sort of the laxity of your joints. You're making your joints less stable. You're stretching out those connective tissues, those ligaments that are allowing your limbs to move through these extreme ranges of motion. But while it may be required for whatever activity you're pursuing, it may not be healthy for you. And in the long run, may not be a good situation for you. So, I think the concept to take away here is just that there's a certain amount of flexibility depending on different sports and activities that your body needs to be allowed to move through to be able to best perform those things. And different specific activities may require different levels of flexibility. In terms of just general health and fitness and whatnot, simply moving through the normal, natural, full range of motion of the exercises we perform with some consideration to what's safe for the joint, will develop and enhance and maintain a level of flexibility that is completely acceptable for everyday life and for normal activities. Okay. Yeah. So these three things of muscular strength, cardiovascular efficiency, flexibility, these are the things that we're enhancing through exercise. We're developing these attributes, these raw materials and things that are being enhanced through exercise. And those three things are sort of transferable to anything that we do with our bodies and with our muscles. Okay. Next, we get into a couple of things that are sort of genetically determined. All right. One of these would be bodily proportions. Okay. There's just certain, bodily proportions that lend themselves well to certain types of athletic events or skills and abilities. And, obviously our body proportion, talking about our height, the length of our limbs, the sort of the point of attachment of muscles, and the distance of our muscle attachments from the joint, and all these different types of things influences sort of the physics or the biomechanics of movement. So these body proportions, you could have somebody that sort of has natural bodily proportions that make them very well suited for certain things, but not very well suited for other things. Even with like a weightlifting, say somebody that's bench pressing, okay, somebody that has wider, broader shoulder structure with shorter limbs is going to be able to, say, bench press, sort of have an advantage in a bench press versus somebody that has these very long limbs. So, you think of these power lifters and things, most of them are very wide and broad and have shorter limbs, because those are the kind of bodily proportions that give them an advantage in sort of bench pressing or squatting or things like that. Where you take a guy like Shaquille O'Neal, the former basketball player, that's like 7'4" and has these extreme long limbs, he's at a disadvantage trying to squat and bench press and things, because he's got much longer distance that he has to press the weight through than somebody with those shorter limbs and a broader structure. And
I bet you could
like
still
that.
bench a fair amount, though, that man.
Yeah, I mean, it
Even
doesn't
now.
mean he's not strong.
I
What it
understand.
comes
It's
to is just
the levers. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the lever thing. So you've got a situation where he's inefficient. He may have great strength, but inefficient in applying that strength through a range of motion because of those disadvantaged leverage factors and things like that. So, when you take like the sport of American football or whatever, you've got all these different positions, and certain physical attributes are good at one position. Say if you're a lineman, offensive lineman or something, that make you good at that, but you wouldn't be a good wide receiver, or you may be a good running back or something like that, but you wouldn't be a good lineman or a linebacker or something. So a lot of what makes people good at their positions is they have the physical structure and the physical attributes that are more applicable for, being easier to perform and having an advantage to perform the different movements and skills and whatnot that they have to do at that position. You're not going to be able to, take a line or a wide receiver or something like that and turn them into a linebacker. They just don't have the body type for that.
Got it.
Or vice versa. So this is what I'm talking about with these bodily proportions, is that certain body types, certain structures are going to be well suited for certain types of things, but maybe not well suited for other things. But these attributes are going to be something that influence how well somebody can perform at a given skill or athletic event or activity. Okay.
Yeah, this is going to this echoes back to. I don't know, a lot of the listeners will be familiar with this. Doug McGuff's point in Body by Science, where he says it's the body that selects the activity does not produce the body. Because that's one of those myths, right? So there's prevailing myths in culture where people think if they do a certain sport or a certain exercise modality, they'll look a certain way or look like a certain individual, which just isn't how it works.
Yeah.
Just at one quick note, we've got 15 minutes, but we've got just let's try and get all 6, because I've got a hard stop on the hour. So just bear that in mind.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. So this actually brings up a good point, and I'm glad you brought this up, is that we get all sorts of nonsense where you'll hear things like, things like Pilates supposedly build a dancer's body, build a long, lean dancer's body. Okay. It's Pilates doesn't develop a long, lean dancer's body. It's that if you have a long, lean dancer's body, you will be better at Pilates. So what you have is people that have those types of body types are naturally attractive to things that they're good at with those body types. So dancing, ballet, Pilates, whatnot, they're going to, like you just pointed out with Dr. McGuff, is that body type selects the activity because people recognize that they're good at that. People that are the, short, stocky, broad, short-limbed people with good muscle structure are going to be good at weightlifting. So they're going to be drawn to that. People that are 7 feet tall with real long limbs are going to be drawn to basketball or something. And, like we talked about with football players in the various positions, so if you have those body types, you're going to discover in life that you're good at certain activities, and then you're drawn to those activities because you're good at them, and it's positive reinforcement, and you get recognition for that, and you get more enjoyment and so forth out of doing that because you're good at it. So it's not that those activities develop those body types or those attributes. It's that those attributes and body types, find those activities that they're good at. Okay.
Yeah. Don't confuse correlation for causation, right? Yeah.
Right. And, Arthur Jones used to tell a story where he said that, if you were from another planet and you came down to Earth and you happened to observe a basketball game, a professional basketball game, you may observe and notice that all the people on the court are very tall with very long limbs and all of this sort of stuff. And you might deduce that, geez, playing this game makes you very tall with long limbs. And it's confusing the cause and effect. It's not that that sport gives you that body type. It's that body type is good at that sport. So those are the type of people that are going to be at the top of the sport and, be doing those types of things. Okay. But the fitness industry wants you to believe that doing different types of exercise or different types of different methods of exercise are going to selectively develop certain attributes and turn your body into something that it's not. Okay. So again, the Pilates or dance or something is going to develop that long, lean body, and that if you do weights, it's going to make you, bulky and all this kind of stuff. And it's just confusing this cause and effect of body types and sort of the genetic influence of how our bodies are and how they develop. Okay.
Got it.
So obviously this is purely a genetic thing. The other issue would be what we call neurological efficiency.
So we're on number 5 now, right? Neurological efficiency.
This would be number 5, neurological efficiency. So now you've got something where, again, this is, primarily a genetically acquired factor where sort of the ability to recruit a high percentage of your muscle fibers and, sustain the contraction and produce force and things like this. So, back in the mid 80s, right before Arthur sold Nautilus, he was doing a lot of research with the precursors to the Medix medical machines. And he was doing a lot of testing and developing these testing machines and doing these things. And he discovered some factors that, that kind of fall into this neurological efficiency where certain people could contract their muscles at a very high percentage, all right, sort of voluntarily recruit a very high percentage of their muscle fibers, and they had much greater strength, but then of course they had lesser endurance, all right. So what he had done is they had done things where they'd given people, say, 80% of their max strength, a load that represented 80% of their max strength. and then they would have them perform a set to failure. And some people might only be able to do, and I'm just plugging in numbers here and giving a representative example, but somebody working with 80% might only be able to perform 8 reps with that 80%, but then another subject might be able to perform 20 reps with their 80%. Okay. Now, both people worked with 80% of their max load, but sort of their neurological efficiency was much different. One recruiting a very high level of muscle fibers into action, but then of course, once those fatigue, you got no more in reserve to keep going, where another subject can't recruit as many muscle fibers into action all at once, but they can sustain that over time and have greater endurance. So there's things like that. Basically, neurological efficiency is sort of the nervous system's ability to tap in, to stimulate, to recruit muscle fibers, and so forth. Some people are great of a very high level of activation and can produce a lot of power and strength from that. And again, that's going to make them good at certain types of activities that require that, maybe a sprinter in track and field, or a football player at various positions to be able to just explode off the offensive line and so forth, and develop these things. And then other people are going to be better at sort of things that don't require as much high level strength, but require more sustained activity and things like that. So
is it always one or the other, basically, for the most part?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, some people can have sort
just
of
somewhere in between
mixture,
spectrum,
kind of an average,
right?
Right.
Yeah.
So again, if we kind of graph this out, we might have a bell curve where a lot of the people are kind of in the middle with the average abilities of some of each. But then you've got the extremes on either end where somebody that's great, capable of great explosive power or something, or somebody that's capable for very long feats of endurance or something, so you got those different things. But since we're limited on time, moving on to the sixth factor would be skill. Okay. And skill is simply sort of our acquired ability to become proficient at performing some task or some athletic event or whatnot, or some movement. Okay. And skill can be enhanced. It's not enhanced through exercise, other than your skill at performing that specific exercise can be enhanced. But skills, by their very nature, are very specific. All right. So the development of skill is very specific to the skill in question, okay, or the action you're attempting to perform. So this is where motor learning science and that discipline comes in, and the development of skill is highly specific and is best acquired by practicing the activity that you desire to improve upon. Okay, but practicing that activity in the exact same way that you intend to, that's required by what you're trying to learn and be good at. Okay, so if you're trying to become a good football quarterback and be good and very precise and controlled at throwing a football, you need to practice throwing a football. Okay, and you need to practice very specifically at developing and repeating that exact action over and over and over again, so that you develop the coordination, the control of your muscles, and that mind to muscle connection, and all of that just being very specifically honed towards that action. Okay. Same thing would be, shooting a basketball or something, or performing a gymnastics move. Okay. That repetitive, highly specific practice over and over and over again is going to develop that overall control and those abilities to be enhanced. And when it comes to skill, the very important part here is that the development of skills and the practice that you do to develop those skills there's the tendency for that practice to transfer over to the enhancement of that skill. There's three different types of transfer, okay? We have positive transfer. What this means is that the practice you're performing is positively transferring over or enhancing that end goal skill that you're trying to acquire.
It's like perfect practice, basically, in other words, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, got it.
Yeah, right. Perfect practice. So that means that everything you're doing in practice is transferring over and making you better at that goal skill. Okay, that's positive transfer. Then we have negative transfer, and what that means is that the way that you're practicing is not positively transferring over and enhancing your skill. It's actually negatively hurting your skill. All right, and what that means is that you're practicing in such a way that it's not helping you; it's hurting you. Okay, and this is done where if you had something where you were practicing for basketball and you were shooting at a hoop that was slightly at the wrong height, all right? So in basketball, the hoop is at 10 feet, okay? So let's say you set the hoop at 9 foot 10 inches or something instead of 10 feet. And you practice at 9 foot 10, you get very good at 9 foot 10, but then in the game or something, you're using a 10-foot hoop. You developed all your skills for 9 foot 10, and now that 2-inch difference, you're going to be off. You're going to
the rim every time.
Yeah.
I've actually had this exact experience. Yeah, I've had it where I played. I remember playing at a court and the hoop was higher, and I was aware of this stuff. Maybe you're just aware of it intuitively, right? Because you shoot the ball on 11, 12-foot hoop, and then you go to a 10-foot hoop and you can see how you're overshooting it and you have to adjust. And it used to really bother me. I'd refuse to play on it if friends of mine wanted to play. And the only reason I'd play on a small hoop is if you just want to do some dunking, right? That's what you want. But don't shoot on it.
Yeah. Can have a little fun that way. But yeah, so that would be negative transfer. And then what we have, the third thing is called indifferent transfer, meaning that the way you're practicing, it's not helping you, but it's not hurting you either. Okay, so it's just not having any effect. But what motor learning tells us is that the development of skills needs to be highly specific, that the only things that positively transfer are that highly specific practice that develops those skills. So when we apply this to this idea of this functional training and exercise, going into the gym and doing an exercise that kind of sort of mimics what you want to do in real life, but doing it with added resistance or something, that is not going to be a positive transfer situation, because as soon as you add resistance to a skill, you're changing the skill to something different, and you're causing the recruitment of muscle recruitment patterns to be different than what they would with the thing. So with this, if a football quarterback tried to use a heavier football to try to develop his throwing strength or something, throwing that heavier football is a different skill than throwing the regulation weight football. Okay, so throwing that heavier football is going to develop a different skill than throwing the regular football. So it's not going to enhance his throwing ability. Okay, and it's not going to be a very good way to develop his throwing muscles. Okay. Same would apply if he went into the gym and he used a pulley and cable machine and tried to pretend he was throwing a football with the pulley and cable machine, thinking he's going to develop his throwing strength or something. Again, he's developing a different skill that's not transferable to the actual skill that he's wanting to get good at. So this goes on down the line with all of these different balancing and stability, trying to do squats on a BOSU ball. You can get better and improve your skill at performing squats on a BOSU ball, but that doesn't mean it's going to transfer into real life doing, walking and climbing a flight of stairs or stepping off a curb or doing some athletic event, you're not going to have better stability and balance in that other event, because all you did is develop the skill of standing on a Bosu ball doing squats. So you have a situation that these things don't transfer. So all of these functional ability things that people think they're doing, they're really just performing various, what I sometimes refer to as circus tricks, where they're able to develop their skills at those little tricks of balancing on a ball or a Bosu board or doing these funky different exercises. They're improving those skills, but they're not doing anything that is being transferable to real life. Okay. And by the same token, performing exercises on a machine are not going to hurt you at developing skills in real life. Okay. All we're doing in the gym with exercise is trying to develop those raw materials, that strength, that cardiovascular efficiency, the flexibility, whatnot, building all that structure, enhancing that engine, so that anything we do with our muscles are going to be applicable. Because what does transfer is muscular strength transfers to anything you use that muscle to. Okay. So these physical attributes that we're developing with the muscles and the cardiovascular efficiency and the flexibility, those are physical attributes that anything we use our bodies for, we're going to be better at because we've got that better engine and that better raw materials to produce those things. But we have to specifically practice the things that we want to get good at. Okay. Mm-hmm. So while those physical attributes and those raw materials will help us with anything in life, okay, to become best at any certain activity or any certain skill, we have to specifically practice that skill. So the takeaway for, say, athletes is that when you're in the gym, you should train in a way according to muscle and joint function, and you should train in a way according to the principles of proper exercise, and you should develop your body and your strength and your muscle and everything to its fullest. And then separately from that, you should go out and practice the skills that you wish to become good at. Yeah. Okay? But you need to practice those skills utterly specifically, without changing it, without adding resistance to those skills or anything like that. Practice the exact skills over and over and over again. So the exercise and the skill development are two totally different things.
Got it. Okay, Tim, that was awesome. I need to wrap it up there. I know we've got a little bit of a connection issue there towards the end. You did an amazing job covering those 6 factors, and I've learned so much during this podcast. It's been really great. So just quickly, if you're interested in Tim's services to help you with your business in terms of, just being better at personal training, basically, and serving your clients, Tim does provide workshops, mentoring, and seminars. You can go to his website, stronglifetraining.com, or email Tim to info@stronglifetraining.com. And to find the blog post for this episode and download the PDF transcript, please go to highintensitybusiness.com, search for episode 368. And until next time, thank you very much for listening.